Like there's a real celebration and buffoonery about like, oh my God, a body? What? Did you know that was here? And I think that's such a celebration.
Yeah, that's perfect. Woody Shticks is a comic stripper and burlesque performer with a kaleidoscopic portfolio, including production, design, education, and many other brightly rhinestoned occupations and preoccupations as well. He's also been the director, production manager, and co-star of our recent tour with You're Wrong About, called A Massive Seance, a full stage show that went far beyond the typical live podcast experience. As a complement to our most recent episode on thongs and their history in America, Woody and I talk about our own history with and philosophies around burlesque. And I tell him about the drama surrounding the first burlesque troupe to make it big in the United States way back in the 1860s. The content of this episode is a little sexier than usual, so if that sounds good to you, come and experience the radical joy that burlesque has provided Woody and me, and learn how art forms like this continue to speak hilarious truth to the boring-ass powers that be. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. Oh my God, I am so excited to be here with one of the best people that I know, Woody. Thank you for being here, my sweet, sweet darling.
Oh, it's sincerely my pleasure. I'm tickled.
Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, so Woody, you and I have gotten to know each other pretty intimately the last few months because you were the director, stage manager of our live show.
It's true.
A Massive Seance with You're Wrong About. And it featured a lot of burlesque, which was very surprising, I think, to a podcast audience. And it was actually, I think, your thonged ass that really got me thinking about thongs. So really, this is an episode for you.
I am honored that my thonged ass could be burned into your retinas, like staring at an eclipse.
It was really like, it was like staring into the sun and the moon all at the same time.
Bless it. Alignment. Yeah, if I turn to the side, it's like a celestial body.
Yeah, it is. So, we were really excited to get you involved in the show because I've actually been a fan of your burlesque work, your comedy stripping for, years, because we had some mutual friends in common in the burlesque scene. I was once a burlesque performer myself, if you can believe that, audience. I know. So before we get into exactly who you are, how you got here, I want to kind of define burlesque for our audience, modern burlesque. Do you have a definition you go to when people ask you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I am really privileged to work with a lot of people, specifically queer women and femmes in the burlesque space who have been kind of really responsible for the burlesque resurgence that we've seen in the States anyway over the last 20 years. It really is a fairly recent resurgence that we're in this kind of neo-burlesque. Some people call it nerdlesque. Other people call it, kind of this striptease with some through line that's happening now. But burlesque is obviously a much older form, which I know you know a lot about. Mm-hmm. And I, as a practitioner, know a lot about experientially. But what is burlesque is a really profound question. But I think it's striptease. It's the art of striptease, specifically focusing on using striptease as a tool for social understanding. And some people might call that social commentary as well. But burlesque all the way down has always been kind of politically motivated and politically orbiting and really interested in the uplift of the bodies that are doing it. And historically, burlesque has been pioneered by marginalized bodies, by fat bodies, by disabled bodies, by Black and brown bodies. And that's still true today. I'm really grateful. So while there are a lot of like thin, quiet white women in burlesque, I think the larger contingent of contemporary burlesque are some really rowdy, some really radical, and some really bodacious babes of all genders.
I think that's a fantastic explanation, and has definitely been my experience too over the last, handful of years when I got involved in it. And I think it does focus a lot on like camp, yes, but like this caricature of whatever it's trying to make a commentary on, right? It has so much in common with drag in that it is this over dramatized version of whatever it has to say. It says it big and it says it in the funniest way possible with lots of puns, lots of tongue-in-cheek comedy. And I think it's one of my actual favorite things in the world.
Me too. Me too. Yeah, I think that there's a lot to say about too, like where stripping begins and burlesque ends. And like, no, there's no precise answer. No one really knows. I have feelings about it, but everyone has feelings about it. And I'm grateful to work with, burlesquers all the time who are just thinking about that. I think that there's a small contingent of burlesquers that are not informed about sex workers and their inclusion in the space, but those people are either leaving or being forced out by sex workers, and we love to see it. So
we love to see
I think, thinking exactly like you said, like about what it means now and what it could mean in the future. There are a lot of like cool, smart babes working on that right now.
And I think a lot of people, like probably a lot of people in our audience that aren't familiar with the burlesque that we're talking about, when they hear the word burlesque, they think of Moulin Rouge. Maybe they think of the Cher, Christina Aguilera vehicle burlesque.
That's burlesque.
That's burlesque. And so I think it is like really important to understand that burlesque is not necessarily, it can be, but it's not necessarily just a striptease performance that's done straight faced to kind of titillate. It is, it often includes skits. It often includes stand-up comedy in a way. It's almost a play more than it is a dance in my experience.
That's right. Yeah, I think so. It's part of the heritage of theater. I think, highfalutin academic types talk a lot about big T theater and little T theater, but, basically all that means is like, are we watching plays? Like that is generally big T theater, or are we watching like performances in a structured environment? And that to me is like the lowercase theater. And, not to be a theater guy about it, but like that would include things like cabaret, things like dance, things like vaudeville, right? All of that kind of lives in this world of theater. And one of the coolest things about burlesque is that it lives in a cabaret tradition, which means that it's like part of this mixed bag approach to performance, and that none of those performance styles are more important than the other. We kind of need them all together in some of the most compelling work, and the work that actually is like changing communities, both the people who perform and the people who watch and participate as audience members. Those things are all kind of swimming in that mixed soup, that like big, confetti cannon full of performance styles that kind of like circulates around theater, but really is exactly like you're referencing, right? It is like theatrical. We have sets, we have costumes, we have through lines, we have political subversion, we have gender exploration, we have cis people exploring gender, which is such a cool thing that I think drag is really inviting in. And I think cis people should stand behind everyone else as we explore gender. But, as a casually cis man myself, like it's a space, burlesque is a space for me to explore gender and to kind of put masculinity up on stage and then skewer it in front of everyone's eyes every night.
And I mean, for our live show, which we will continue doing, so I'm not going to give away the full conceit, but, we took something like the spiritualist movement of the 18 and early 1900s, and we tried to turn that into something that the audience could interact with, have fun with, experience the joy of, and have this heightened experience of the things that we cover in the first half of the show that Sarah and I, talk about spiritualism. And then the second half, kind of that world comes alive and comes to us. And I don't know, the joy of making this live show was really the highlight of my year and of a year that I think was dark for many people. But like in that world of burlesque, you know, each show in each different city, we have a new drag performer and a new burlesquer, and just getting to know them really quick, getting to know their style and learning how to work with them and let them kind of shine and come out was just like, I don't know. It was kind of a singular experience, and it's something that you get to do all the time. I'm sure it gets exhausting in many ways, but you know, I mean, you just brought like so much fucking joy to our lives. And podcasters famously sit at home alone on their computers. So this was just such a beautiful experience.
I'm so thrilled to hear that. It was a highlight for me too. And I think the world of the seance is the perfect coupling to the world of burlesque, right? Because it is all about like the ecstasy of the body, and ecstasy in a really wide-ranging way, right? Like it is both joyful and horrific. It is a celebration in kind of every sense of the word. And I think what the burlesque guests that were featured in Seance, but kind of all the burlesquers that I know and love, are celebrating the body, but not in this kind of like body positive, you're beautiful Dove ad way, which has its space. But I think maybe some more radical work is being done in the space of liberating the body and liberating yourself and your relationship to your body. And that's not a clean line. That's like cumulative and is nonlinear. So I think the burlesque I'm interested in is stuff that is really like digging into what the body means and what it could mean in space and what it means to couple it to other ideas. And so Seance was a really cool melding of those ideas to say like, you know, seances were literally concerned with the ghostly form versus the corporeal form. And like burlesque is much interested in the same, right? Like the differences between the idea of a body and the reality of a body standing in front of you and like taking off its bra and throwing its weight at you, literally, I think is like an ecstasy in a really complicated, beautiful, fruitful way.
Oh my God. What a, fantastic way to put it. And I think, you know, I hadn't really studied burlesque before making the thong episode. So I've been kind of in that world that was kind of coming concurrently to spiritualism. So there's a lot in there of like this Victorian sexuality that needs an outlet that has no way to come out except in these special kind of theatrical spaces, whether they be a seance space or a burlesque space. So it ended up being perfect. And it led us to this thong content. Woody, you're wearing a thong. Is that right?
Correct. 100% correct. In fact, I'm Donald Duck in it. I'm wearing a crew neck sweatshirt on the top and just a thong on the bottom.
He commits to the bit, people.
I feel comfortable. I just feel comfortable.
I've gotten really comfortable with your ass. That's true.
That's true. Thank you. You know, that's really important in my true friendships.
Yeah, no, it made me feel really safe somehow.
Oh, thank you.
You're
that
so
is
welcome.
Sincerely my life's work. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, I am going to eventually here tell you the story of the first big burlesque troupe that came to the United States. But first, I want to hear more about your history with burlesque. How in the world did you get here? How did you become what you refer to as a comic stripper and a burlesque performer? Take us there.
I will. Yeah, it's really was an accident. Continues to be an accident. I keep failing, not upward, but forward, perhaps, which I like. But I was a ballet dancer first. As a kid, I was really interested in professional performance, like from the jump. And as a ballet dancer, this is something I think like ballet people realize, but maybe other people don't realize, is that especially AMAB ballet dancers wear thongs from a really early age. So
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Dance belts, baby. Anybody who wears a full seat dance belt is a quitter. But no, there's a specialty undergarment worn by any, AMAB ballet dancers and male ballet dancers called a dance belt, which is just like a padded, very, very strong thong that is meant to be worn under tights. It gives you that Ken doll look. So if you look at like kind of male ballet dancers, that kind of like really muscular underpinning where it's like, oh, you can see there's a bulge, there's a shape, but it's desensationalized and kind of like present, but smoothed. So it's like partially aesthetic for sure, but it's also a safety mechanism, like swinging your legs around, jumping around, lifting up partners rolling around on the floor can be dangerous if you have things flopping around.
Sure.
Very similar to a kind of sports cup, an athletic supporter. So yeah, ballet, of course, has its own version. And that was a required garment for me as a kid. So the other day, as I was like musing to be like, oh, when did I really like start wearing thongs, like thinking I could like kind of have some rosebud moment. And I was like, I sincerely don't remember. It was just like always been part of it. So that kind of was first. And I think like ballet dancers are famously nuts, and B, interested in the body. And so that was definitely my situation as a kid, and kind of drifting into teenagerhood and performance as a teenager. And then I pivoted to theater, not kind of as a change, but kind of as like an incorporation. I was doing a lot of dance theater and theater before dance as well. Went to theater school, famously got kicked out of theater school for being too gay to book anything but children's theater. Then went on the road teaching children's theater for a year and a half, which ruled. And then made my way to the Northwest, where I finished my schooling in theater and dance, and that's where I started doing burlesque. So one of my dearest friends now, and we met on the road teaching children's theater, smoking weed in the middle of nowhere, Montana. Shout out Tootsie Spangles.
Hey, babe.
We found each other, and when we both moved to Seattle, she started exploring burlesque and invited me to kind of come into some of the things she was learning. She comes from theater as well, and through that we met our third Libertini, Hattie Hellcat, and the three of us just instantly clicked. We were three theater kids who also had been trained as clowns, who were then learning how to be trained as burlesque dancers. And so at that time too, I had worked as a stripper in bars and clubs, and really been on the sex work side of stripping and striptease, and then figured out how to marry that to our theater background. And the rest is kind of history. We became the Libertinis, and we performed for almost 10 years altogether. We are still together, just making work in our personal lives and with each other as like kind of writing partners. But we have lost multiple theater awards in the Northwest, and we're very proud of that.
Incredible.
And have created kind of theater work all over the place. So I came into burlesque kind of just as an add-on to Tootsie and Hattie's explorations of burlesque in their theater practice, and discovered that it really made a lot of sense to me. Kind of this marriage of the body and of writing. Burlesque is like incredibly literary. There's a whole wing of burlesque called nerdlesque in some parlances. So real nerds getting literary about their work, but really exploring kind of theatrical forms through a celebration of the body.
Ugh, yes. And, I think about you and how you came to burlesque, and I can't help but think about the fact that you were raised in a somewhat unconventional manner, in kind of literally a Puritan tradition.
That's
so
right.
Would you tell us a little bit about like maybe how growing up that way either enhanced or maybe challenged your desire to do burlesque eventually?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's definitely there. It felt subconscious at the time. And now looking back at my career, it's like, oh, it's right there on the surface. It's like a really clear 1-2 punch. But yeah, I grew up in a close religious community, super conservative, Puritan Christianity, really disinterested in the body, really interested in policing the body, both literally and figuratively. And so clothing was always a hot topic in our community. I and my siblings were kind of in this weird in-between place too, though. While it was a closed community, like my parents still gave us some opportunity to like do outside things. So like I still had friends who went to public school. As I mentioned, was in a ballet company. I was performing. I was, kind of traveling a lot and seeing family out of state. So like I was aware that there are plenty of other things to do with your life, but was a true believer for a while. But so much of that was really focused on clothing that covered your body in kind of every way. So everyone, regardless of gender, and of course that community is a real gender essentialist about like, we got men's and we got women's. And those women's better have long hair and those men's better shave every day. And so I grew up wearing a uniform every day. I grew up wearing, shirts and ties and often suit jackets to church. We had like sock codes and just like a really regimented style of dress that was meant to hide the body. When we swam together, we were supposed to swim split by gender and still then wearing clothes. So even like in a uni-gendered environment, it was still like the body was a really fearful thing.
Yeah.
And all of that obviously made me pretty crazy then and now. I was also going through conversion therapy at the same time. So I started conversion therapy when I was 11. So I, had a lot of Christian older men asking me about my fantasy life and what I masturbated to, which seems really normal, doesn't it?
Yeah, not problematic in any way.
No, definitely hasn't set me up for some weird authority kink. I'm working on it. But all of that to say, I also research porn and kind of do a lot of porn stuff, which is not really part of our conversation today. However, it does come back to thongs because, like many gay men I have learned, especially in my era, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and one of my sexual awakenings was walking through the underwear aisle in a department store, and through that discovered kind of outside of ballet, and that felt like a technical garment, I was like, oh, people are wearing thongs under their normal clothes. Even at TJ Maxx, you could find some kind of bespoke kind of Perry Ellis thong or whatever, and some kind of bright fabric. And it blew my mind. And I, tore a whole show called Caught One-Handed, all about my very neurotic, maladapted masturbation practices. But a lot of it was stealing the boxes of underwear, not the underwear itself, but the boxes.
Just the boxes.
So I could smuggle it home and kind of look at these men wearing thongs and be like, what a radical, can you imagine wearing a thong on your body? And during that time, I would come home for conversion therapy and then cut up my underwear into thongs. I would make thongs myself out of underwear and never wear them out, wear them neurotically in my room and look at myself in the mirror and take pictures of myself on a digital camera and then delete the pictures and making my own porn.
So it sounds like conversion therapy worked really well.
Yeah. Really well. Yeah. Imagine my faggotry was a ball of Play-Doh just being squeezed, it's gonna come out. It just came out between the fingers of my life,
Yeah, that's a beautiful metaphor.
It didn't go anywhere. Turns out it just came out in the weirdest ways. But, that all, I think, directly informed my now both my fixation, but also my political commitment to bodies in space, whether they be nude or in whatever garment they choose, thongs included. I am really interested in that and require it in my social life and in my work life. I'm really interested in kind of those garments because at the time it felt like a political act. And now, as an adult, I can see that it very much is and always has been.
More after this. And now, back to the show. Listening to you talk about this, I think part of what I love so much about burlesque is the pressure that it takes off of sexuality and just sex in general, because it's very serious. Many people, most people, maybe not most, but many people on all sides of the political spectrum treat it as this very serious thing. And burlesque treats it as this almost cartoonish, hilarious, ridiculous thing. And I think that that's actually a very important and not common sentiment that is actually really healing for people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, not to be a theater nerd about it, but one of the distinctions I draw between stripping and burlesque, which is a false distinction. There's room for everything in that bucket. But that, strippers kind of are hey, my body's under here. Do you want to see it? And then the tease for them is knowing that it's there and choosing to show it to you. And I think a through line in burlesque, especially neo-burlesque, this era that we're in now, is oh my God, who put these tits here? There's a real celebration and buffoonery about oh my God, a body? What? Did you know that was here?
Yeah.
And I think
perfect.
That's such a celebration. And I think that actually A, that's fun to watch, of course, but B, I think it does mimic how a lot of people discover their body, in both their literal puberty, but also in their adulthood. We're constantly in a state of becoming and discovery, right? And as a person staring into the beautiful sunset of 40, it's oh yeah, oh my God, I'm still discovering my body every day, And I think burlesque explores that in a really powerful way to be wow, I have this body. Oh my God, how do I share it? I'm going to share it with you. Again, that's a false distinction between stripping and burlesque. They're both kind of the same, but But in my experience, some of the coolest burlesque really is that like, whoa, did you know that I had a bra under here? What's a bra? Do you want to see it? Look at it. And it's really more about that, as you're saying, rather than like, ooh, my titty's going to turn you on and you're going to lose your mind. Yeah. It's like, yeah, maybe. But also like, I think we're just going to all enjoy that. Like, wow, look at these fun things I have under my clothes.
Yep. And I mean, I don't know. I'm generally a bit of a shy guy, trademark. And I don't know, but in burlesque, doing burlesque, and I'm a mild burlesque person in our show. You know, you won't get to see a whole lot, audience, but you know, it isn't even really about that. It's about the pageantry of the ability to act sexy without the pressure of being sexy. You know, I just think that that's such a false idea that burlesque is somehow inherently sexy, because it's really a parody. It's a parody of sexiness. And that makes you feel kind of safe to actually like get down a little bit, because you're not like, look at me, I'm like this gorgeous creature. It's more like, I don't know. Let's see what the fuck happens. And it's so fun. Yeah, it's so fun and healing and beautiful. And it's,
That's so well said. Yeah. And I think like in my experience as a burlesque performer, it's often like, it's a really cathartic's like an overused word, but it is like, it's actually great to go through the mating ritual, but then stop it before you mate, right? It's like, that's actually really healing. It's good for your neural pathways to be like, ooh, the preamble. And then like your act is done and you're like, okay, bye. And the curtain comes in and you like walk off backstage and you like eat some pot stickers and complain about how your shoes are hurting you. Like that's really deeply cathartic, because I think normies are trapped in this environment where it's like, I only take off my clothes to be sensual. And when I do so, then I must perform the sexual union. And it becomes this like really stressful, neurotic kind of like that doesn't seem fun to me. I'm like, no, it's actually really fun to like put on a whole show of like taking off almost all my clothes. And then right before you see me nude, the lights go out. Like that must be doing something fun for my brain, because I feel like pretty good about it. You know? And so I think more people could explore that too.
I think that's a great place to start to transition into story time with me.
I love it.
You want this?
Know everything.
Okay.
Tell me about strippers of yore.
I will. Okay. So what we're going to be talking about is the first kind of official burlesque troupe and their kind of introduction to the American scene. Have you ever heard the term leg shows?
Yes, I sure have.
Yeah. Pretty self-explanatory. How would you describe a leg show?
Well, most recently I just finished rewatching The Sopranos, and there's a poster on the wall in their office that just says leg show, all 9 seasons or 6 seasons, however many there are, went on forever. But what I know from my experience in burlesque and history of burlesque is really featuring costumes and kind of sets, including curtains that really like allow someone, usually a woman, to show off their gams.
Yep, that's about it. And it was pretty racy for the time, but it was really just kind of women in tights.
I love that.
Instead of women in STEM, women in tights.
Women in tights. I'll make that new acronym. I'll get it to you ASAP.
Yeah. Thank you. Need a full report. So in 1868, which is like, oh my God, I just feel like going back to 1868, it's kind of the same story and the same moral panic and the same critiques. And it's like almost been 200 years. I mean, I guess 150, but I just really want to emphasize 1868. All right.
Correct. We're fighting for states' rights at this time, right? Like what else is happening in the world?
Yeah,
Chaos,
I mean, that's
nonsense.
States' rights, allegedly.
Yeah. Allegedly. So they say.
So they say.
Heard that once.
So there is a troupe coming over from London who's been very popular in Europe. Of course, it takes Americans a little bit longer to be ready for anything European.
And Londoners are they're ribald. They love ribald.
They do.
Ribaldry?
They do.
They're raunch. Very raunchy.
Very raunchy. Yeah. And this burlesque dancer, performer, her name was Lydia Thompson. She had kind of assembled this group of other women in burlesque, and they were called the British Blondes. They come over to New York City, and they start this play burlesque show, whatever you want to call it, called The Man at the Wheel. And basically, it's just this satire of contemporary politics. I would have loved to describe it to you, but I can't really piece together what it was actually about. But it was definitely political, as you've talked about burlesque often is. Yeah.
In jokes upon in jokes upon in jokes.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And in fact, it's funny you say that because there was a show parodying the show, right? So there was a burlesque show that was a burlesque show of the burlesque show. And that is very classic. And that's definitely still happening today.
You could still see it anywhere in the Northwest. Some bisexual girl with blue hair is doing exactly that. And you know what? Keep on keeping on, girl. We need you. We love it.
We need it. We need just sort of like this infinite mirroring back and forth forever until we can no longer understand what's happening. Yeah.
Gotta have it.
Gotta have it. So burlesque at this time featured a lot of high kicks, which I cannot do. I feel like you can high kick.
Oh, I sure can. It's a calling card.
Can you kick yourself in the face?
Yeah, I actually can.
I'm sure you can.
Oh, yeah. I did in a massive seance. Come back next year. Come see it. In a thong, no less.
Yeah, just bleeding out of your nose on stage.
Correct. Yeah, we're on the edge. I'm a woman, not in tights, just a woman on the edge.
A woman on the edge. So there was dancing, of course, scantily clad, I suppose, which meant in 1868 that the half of the upper thigh was exposed, which was I know, half of the upper thigh. You know, it was full of like what would have been considered then, perhaps not now, very sensual movements, right?
Oh, yeah. Very focused in the middle of the body.
Oh, I'm sure. And most importantly, as we've talked about today, it was full of puns, rhymes, literary allusions, and political jokes. And I think puns is such an important part of burlesque that we haven't really talked about.
So essential. Sluts have always been fun.
Oh, yeah. And I think, double entendre is something that I feel like is so intrinsic to the queer community because it's been necessary for us to have double entendres to even exist and speak in the world.
Correct. Shout out normal gossip. Gossip is a tool of the oppressed. And in that same breath, like coded language is a communication tactic of people who need it, right? Like, notice that straight people aren't funny. They don't have to be funny. Notice that men don't gossip. They don't have to gossip, right? Like queer people, women, people of color, disabled people, like these are the people who need to be able to speak to each other without other people listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And they need to be able to find each other through jokes that are part of like an in group, I think.
Yes.
So they did their show. It's the fall of 1868, and it kind of sparks this craze in New York City and other major cities too. And suddenly, like, everyone wants to go to a burlesque show, and it's actually received pretty well. I think we have this idea that everything in the past is like super regressive and puritanical and Victorian, but really people were a lot more down than we give them credit for. So yeah, it was popping off in New York City.
Right. Well, and as your show has covered at length, right? Like one of the only historical records that survive are like records of outcry and of resistance, right?
Yeah.
Like when people just like a thing that's kind of saucy and fun, like they're not writing into the newspaper to be like, I saw some legs and I liked it,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like a lot of people have been seeing legs and liking it for a long time and not felt the need to write to their local paper about it.
Absolutely.
Like they just go out and find the legs.
That's it.
Same today, right? Like there's all kinds of things happening out there that people are enjoying and they're like not telling you about it. And that's pretty good for us, I think.
I think so. So that didn't mean that like everybody was obsessed with it. And I think part of that was because this all lady burlesque troupe had to have male characters, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of this kind of straight drag tradition where men were playing women that we have talked about in our early drag queen series. Go and listen to that. It's a lot in common with what we're talking about today.
Go get
it. women were playing the roles of men. And for the most part, people thought it was funny. Like, it wasn't actually this huge, giant moral panic or anything like that. But there were people who were, basically offended by the way that these women were playing men.
Yeah, of course. And if you're one of those people, please read a book. Please go for a walk. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's what we call punching up. Mm-hmm. Everything's fine.
Everything is going to be okay. But newspapers did call what the British blondes did, quote, an idiotic parody of masculinity.
Yay.
That's what I do every day.
Sounds like a rave review to me. Yeah. Right. Yeah, same. Same. That's what I'm doing right now.
So the Atlantic Monthly actually wrote that they were, quote, unnerved by the delight some of the young women seemed to take in male impersonation.
Can women never rest? Can they never enjoy? Can they never live? The answer is no.
I know.
Someday. We're working on it.
One day. And I just think it's so amazing to go back this far in time and just like all of this stuff that we talk about now that is like these hot button, scary political issues are not new. They're just like, they just have new language and new visibility. But like, people were just like, these women are dressing like men on the theater stage, and I don't think it's okay. And they're, and then the aggrieved masculine, it's just like, that's not what I look like. I'm not an idiot, man. And it's so silly.
Correct. These ladies are having a good time, and it's a time that we didn't provide to them. Oh no, they might cut us out of the equation.
I also liked this description of how these women moved on stage, not necessarily when they were performing the masculine, but when they were kind of doing the leg show aspect and dancing and doing their, titillating moves. It was described in the papers as a frantic outburst of irrepressible animal spirits.
Ooh. Like a buck galloping through a field.
Yes, exactly.
I guess more a doe in this case, but
both.
We can have it all.
We can have it all.
Both, all.
But they're all played by women.
Correct. That's how we like it.
And they also would say, like, it seems like these women have no control over their legs. They're just like moving independently from their body.
I see you, girl. I see you.
Uh-huh. I like this description. In one of the British Blondes shows, because they put on, many different shows, Lydia Thompson, again, the kind of de facto lead of the British Blondes, walked around carrying a riding crop, smoking a cigarette, and wearing a huge hat with a stuffed squirrel on top, which was a parody of this popular Sunday Review article that had called modern women vain, frivolous, manipulative, and materialistic. So that was like her take on...
Hot.
That was her burlesque of this article that was like basically talking shit about the modern woman.
Yes.
I know, right?
I feel like I saw that act 2 weeks ago.
I feel like you did that act 2 weeks ago. So maybe it's not that surprising that burlesque originally was like very popular with women. I think we have this idea that burlesque and striptease and everything was always just for the male gaze. But originally it was really full of women who just absolutely loved watching other women parody masculinity.
Yes. And I would say from an anecdotal perspective, that is largely still the case, right? Like burlesque is dominated by femmes and AFABs and women. And I would say the audiences too, like not exclusively, obviously, there's all kinds of genders out there, but it really does feel like participating in a space of wish fulfillment of femininity, right? Like how can femininity explode and realign and gallop through us? And how can we share that with each other? So yeah, that's my experience today, and I love that. I love that you're finding that in this research.
I know it's a wonderful thing. And unfortunately it will change by the end of this story. But as we know, many, 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 many years later, it turned back. So it's a happy story. So
the women are still in tights.
Turning my legal pad page.
Yeah, flip
They're
it.
Still in tights.
The women, they're still in tights.
Okay. So burlesque is popular. People are loving it. They're packing theaters in New York. And then things hit a wall. And what has been described as the anti-burlesque hysteria begins in the summer of 1869.
2025. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Got it.
Exactly. Nothing changes. History rhymes.
We're trapped on a wheel.
We are. So we're going to have to meet a new character in our story. His name is Manager Alexander Henderson, and he is the manager of the British Blondes.
Okay, I can't tell if I should be excited or scared.
Well, you'll soon find out. So he's British, okay? Americans generally at this time didn't love the British, if you can believe that.
Whoa, really? Americans being scared of anyone not from the contiguous U.S.?
Or anyone who once lorded over us, literally.
Correct.
Alexander Henderson is a pretty cocky guy.
Gross.
And he decides to kind of like go about talking himself and his shows up. And he starts talking about how the publications that write anything negative about him just fucking suck. And yeah, he's just kind of talking shit about town. And the press kind of gets word of this shit talking, okay? So they start firing back at him and basically collude in a way to take down his shows and through that kind of take down burlesque, since he was kind of leading this new American movement.
Again, I feel like this just happened in the city where I live, New Orleans, 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
There's still people doing this to each other.
Yeah, there's still like men that have no business running these shows.
Correct. Just throwing their egos at each other and bruising each other in the mouth.
And this will become literal very soon, what you just said. So the press started calling Alexander Henderson, quote, no better than a pimp. And they started calling him, which I love, a natural Mormon with multiple wives.
Whoa. I want to be a natural Mormon.
He was not a Mormon.
Of course.
They were using that, of course, to slander him and claim that he was having relationships with at least, a handful of these British blondes. We don't really know. We don't know if he was. We do know he was married eventually to Lydia Thompson. And there were rumors. It wouldn't be surprising to me, but regardless, the papers, slandered him as a Mormon.
Of course. I mean, one thing we do know is that gentlemen prefer blondes.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny you say that. One of the things the papers love to write in retaliation to Alexander Henderson was that the British blondes were not actual blondes and that they were dyeing their hair. Oh. Just so bitchy.
Oh, no. For the first time in history and definitely the last, I guess.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They said that their shows were, of course, disgusting and vulgar.
Obviously.
Typical, right? They claimed that the women were coming on stage drunk.
Naturally.
And that they were actually, as they said, hooking from the stage.
Whoa. Yeah. Okay. Been there, done that.
Of course. And they said that it was really typical, and I'm sure that this happens to you a lot, Woody, that men would bring bouquets as large as their bodies to the women on stage.
Never once has that happened to me, unless bouquet is a euphemism.
And they claimed to, which I think is so funny, that they were like, so why are these men bringing these giant bouquets? Are women exchanging favors for these huge bouquets of flowers? And it's like, no. Who wants a giant bouquet of flowers? Give me money. Correct.
Although I'll take a giant bouquet of flowers. That's fine.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm a peasant,
More after this. And now, back to the show. Then it kind of went into the area of we need to keep women and children away from this incarnation of vice, right? And it started to kind of turn
familiar.
toward that. Yeah.
Yeah, when in doubt, don't care for actual children, just weaponize the idea of them.
Yes, exactly.
That's a strategy that always works.
And again, I don't think there were a ton of children coming to these theater shows anyway.
I can't imagine. Unless Newsies is to be believed, I agree. I can't imagine. It's just not that fun of a show. Like, regardless of the bodies, and like, as you're saying, like, it's a lot of political commentary. It's a very nerdy, very heady space. Like, even contemporary shows that I work in today, like, aside from the bodies, which are definitely present, like, a lot of the show is pretty conceptual. It's not really a child-friendly environment for many, 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 many reasons.
Sure. Yeah. Not just inappropriate, but boring for children.
Correct. Like, you shouldn't be here because you would also not like it.
Yeah.
On top of all the other reasons that you shouldn't be here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there was like this one particular journalist that really wanted to bring down specifically Alexander Henderson, but then by kind of default, the British blondes as well. And his name, I couldn't find his first name, but we'll just call him Mr. Butler. Okay.
Ooh.
Mr. Butler is what we'll call him. I'm sure he'd love that.
Yeah, he'd prefer it.
So he works for this kind of theater critic magazine called Spirit of the Times. And he is one of the people who's really railing against Alexander and trying to make people turn against burlesque as an art form. And so he does this really crazy thing where he shows up to one of the shows and confronts Alexander Henderson and just beats the shit out of him.
Yup.
Have you ever been in a theater beef like that?
Ooh, that is such a great question. No, but I have seen that go down several times in gay punk bars. So, I'm no stranger, I'm no stranger to the rain, but no, I've never seen theater managers beat the shit out of each other, although they get very close even today.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. It's like, it had not very much to do with the British blondes. It was just these managers who were just doing like a dick measuring contest all the time and ruining the fun for everyone else.
Always the way.
Always the way.
Men are not fun. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Men, not fun.
No. Some of you are.
Yeah, we do our best. There's a few of us who are trying, but as a group, no, we're failing.
Well, you're welcome to join as soon as you get in shape.
That's right. We do have a club and the membership guidelines are strict. You can contact me for questions.
It's a secret society and the initiation is painful.
Correct. And spoiler alert, if you have to ask me about admission, you will never be admitted. Thank you.
This isn't Fight Club, boys.
Nope.
Sometimes it is. Okay, so...
Yeah, unless it's 1868.
So this feud kind of is what really starts the pushback against burlesque. Like, it actually doesn't have that much to do with the morality of the times. Of course, that's mixed in there, but I mean, we're talking about shows that are selling out so much that riots are breaking out inside and outside because people want to get in so badly. And, so it's not, again, like what you said is so smart because we don't have as much of the positive. We only can look back at the newspapers printing the most sensational headlines, which are usually negative. But by and large, people were into this.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it demonstrates to them so many things, right? It demonstrates to them joy and liberation, but it also is an instigation for them to bring those joys and liberations to their own life. This happens even today, right? Is like normies come to a show and they're like, oh my God, I'm horny for my husband for the first time in 20 years. And it's like, that's great. I'm legitimately thrilled for you. Like, I'm bummed about the last 20 years, but I hope that you go home tonight and you cuddle so hard. I hope that this show has brought some of that to you. And I think that that's always been true of all performance. But yeah, any performance that celebrates the body, I think it enlivens something in normies and observers that they are simultaneously really drawn to and really repelled by.
Yeah, definitely. So then the show kind of goes on the road, and one of the places where it hits really hard and people really enjoy it is in Chicago, which is not surprising because Chicago was also one of the places where the G-string was most popular and actually was made out of when New York banned burlesque in the 1930s, which we talk about in our episode. So if you haven't listened to that.
They are so smart and horny up there in Chicago.
Yeah, they sure
are. It
are.
Remains true today.
So the Chicago Times, for whatever reason, lost to time, I'm not sure, started really calling out British blondes and Lydia Thompson as immoral. And they started to print these op-eds and they started to write these articles that were really pushing back against the burlesque craze. And then Lydia would write into the paper in her own defense, and she just kept saying burlesque is harmless entertainment. And I believe that to be true today as well. Would you call it harmless entertainment, Woody?
Oh, interesting. I don't know that I would use the word harmless because I think it actually does do harm, but to institutions that need to be harmed, right? to ideas and systems that actually could take a big chunk out of the bottom, right? And so and entertainment is a loaded term for me as a lifetime performer. Is there are some art makers that are really interested in entertaining a mode of performance that turns your brain off. I am more interested personally in modes of performance that turn my brain on into hyperdrive. But either way, I think kind of joyful pleasure, that I'm into. And I think burlesque does bring joyful pleasure. And that is something that Americans are doubly scared of.
And maybe we can assume that that's what Lydia Thompson probably meant.
I'm sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm, harmless entertainment, I think, could easily sub into that idea, right? It's it's not harmful to the observer. It's harmful to the institutions that are trying to squeeze the people performing.
Yeah, absolutely. Including the Chicago Times. We're looking at you. So this man named Wilbur F. Story was the owner of the Chicago Times at that moment in history. And he wrote that the British blondes, quote, have an unnecessary lewd exhibition of their persons, such as would not be tolerated by the police in any bawdy house, that they have made use of broad, low, and degrading language, such as men of any self-respect would repudiate, even in the absence of ladies, that their entertainments have been mere vehicles for the exhibition of coarse women and the use of disreputable language, unrelieved by any wit or humor.
All right.
So pretty mean.
Pretty mean. The lady doth protest too much, methinks.
Yeah.
This really is starting to feel like white people wringing their hand for their own sake, because at this literal moment, minstrel shows are being forcibly toured through the South, and not just the South, right? All of these sectors that are having burlesque performances are having ribald performances by people of African descent, often under duress. And those celebrations themselves also celebrate the body, also feature the body, also feature white people in blackface celebrating their idea of the black body. So I don't think the body is what we're scared of. I think what we are scared of is a harpooning of white virtue. Yeah. And that profoundly bums me out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. So lest we think that Lydia Thompson would do nothing about such an insult, what she actually does is take a few of her burlesque ladies and go down to Mr. Wilbur F. Story's home, pull him outside, and horsewhip him.
Yeah. See? Some props are multifunctional. Very practical.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Intensive.
Yes.
I'm not advocating for it, but I also don't think I would stop somebody choosing that avenue of expression.
No. So this causes a huge media storm, right? It's not a well-received move in Chicago.
It's a bold swing. Big swing.
It was bold. And so when Lydia Thompson was asked to comment on the troupe's actions in regard to Mr. Story. She responded by saying, quote, "The persistent and personally vindictive assault in the Times upon my reputation left me only one mode of redress. They were women whom he attacked. It was by women he was castigated. We did what the law would not do for us."
Hell yeah. Now we're talking. Now we're talking. Yeah. That's a healing circle, okay? That is some recompense. That is some radical justice. Again, you do you, but that makes sense to me.
Well, lest we believe in this feminist moment, we must look at a feminist who was actively trying to take down the burlesque scene.
Yeah,
ever heard of such a
naturally. Thing? What? Feminists eating their own? Oh my God.
Never heard of it.
What a new idea.
So there was this feminist, quote unquote, actress, playwright, and general theater person, Olive Logan. And she had really tried to be a star and then unfortunately was kind of forced off the stage because she had hearing loss, which is a big bummer. She became a theater critic and feminist lecturer instead. And there was just something about the British blondes that she really hated. And during her lectures, she would kind of go around talking about how they were this immoral group that was bringing down the entire gender. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think a lot of us need to hear this on all sides of ideological spectrums, but far-right conservatives, I need you to hear this. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean it's bad for you or anyone else.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm bummed that your theater career took a turn, and I'm grateful that we have all kinds of disability on stage now.
Absolutely.
But again, just because you don't like a leg show doesn't mean it's bad for anybody.
I know. And I wonder how much of it was just sort of this like sad kind of unfair envy that she had to experience because it was the 1860s and there wasn't going to be a lot of options for someone who was hard of hearing in this time period, right?
Yes. Creatures who are cornered will lash out, right? And it's a bummer that often we lash out at those of us who are most similar.
I know. And that's very true. So in one of her lectures, she said, "I cannot advise any woman to go upon the stage with the demoralizing influence which seems here to prevail more every day, when its greatest rewards are won by brazen-faced, stained, yellow-haired, padded-limbed creatures, while actresses of the old school, well-trained, decent, cannot earn a living."
Oh my God, the girls in that former camp sound super hot.
I know they do. And I mean, have you experienced this as a burlesque performer / theater kid? Is there a sense that burlesque is lesser than theater?
Oh, yeah. And you know what? I celebrate that. I think that anybody who is interested in like a low art, high art dynamic, like they deserve wherever they put themselves on that spectrum, and like they can have fun in that lonely pyramid, right? Like,
sure.
Anybody who's interested in kind of ranking where their art falls, and like this is being said as somebody who like comes from ballet, like has worked in symphony spaces, has produced in galleries, like there are people in those spaces who really continually assert that they mean more to art ecosystems than the rest of us. And like, great. If that's how you feel, like, I hope that you get locked inside of your symphony hall and play your violin until the end of time. Like, if that's what you want, I want that for you. The rest of us are out in our communities having a good time. So like, you can join us when you want, but like, as long as you want to consider yourself like morally superior, like I hope that moral superiority like makes you as lonely as you were intending to make the rest of us feel. So yeah, this idea like does persist. I think that it is changing, of course, through podcasts like this one. But sincerely, I think that there's still like this idea, and I think we see it in a lot of plays still to this day. I think like the way that theater with a capital T deals with the body and the revelation of the body, both the literal revelation of like skin and flesh, but also like the ideas of the body on stage, I think are still like really steeped in like Chekhovian ideas of like what is proper and what is not. And I am continually shocked by, it's I do less like, quote straight theater these days than I used to, but frequently I would be cast, like I'm thinking of one classic Chekhov play in which I was fully nude on stage. And that was like to contrast the other actors who were more serious, right? It's like, oh, we'll have the dumb, gay, faggy one be nude and the rest of us will remain in our corsets, right? And like that nudity was motivated by story, but it was still kind of, I felt that divide by being like, oh, okay, because I touch burlesque, like it's totally fine for me to be nude in this union house, but you shall still wear like 2 pairs of hosiery and consider yourself superior to me because you are like the lead in this play. And that persists, you know, and it's changing for sure in certain environments, but yeah, it's going on.
I mean, that's like a clown, right? Which is so funny because the clown's role in this world is so vital, and it always has been, of this sort of being that can exist in the ridiculous and almost hold fire to the powerful through parody.
Yes.
And it's like, there's a reason why jesters were the only ones who could influence the king, right? There's something to that.
That's right. And why it all lives in the same world of cabaret, right? Like why burlesque and clowning are so in conversation with each other is like they're both like inherently political forms and are inherently threatening to anybody interested in like the high art, low art dichotomy, right? Because like anybody trapped in that idea of their own art making is inherently non-vital. Oof. So as soon as you start to consider yourself like being above the conversation or like, you know, existential to the conversation, then you're no longer in the conversation, right? Like as soon as you're making theater that's unconcerned with what the political realities are of the lowest classes of people who are involved in making it, then you yourself are no longer part of the conversation and you should shut your mouth.
And you're the clown, to be honest.
Yes, correct. And like
the clown you define a clown as.
Derogatory, right? Yeah, clown
exactly.
Derogatory. Because we are pro clown in this house. In this house, we believe clowns rule.
Okay, so our feminist, quote unquote, derogatory Olive Logan is very popular because of these critiques of burlesque and proto-feminist.
Wait, I'm sorry. A woman aligning herself with patriarchal ideals in order to garner favor and secure for herself some peace of mind? How did that turn out? Yep.
Never heard of such a thing. Well, she was invited by Susan B. Anthony.
Wow.
So hot shit Susan B.
Classic.
Anthony.
Classic.
Invited her to speak at the 1869 Convention of the American Equal Rights Association.
Okay.
Sounds nice.
Sounds nice. Like so many ideas. Like really what we want is equal rights. What we're actually talking about is slut shaming. Okay, cool.
Yep. And you're exactly right, because Olive's speech was about the quote leg business.
Ooh.
And it was not a nice review of the leg business.
Nope.
And it led to her kind of being the flashpoint of this conversation about what women's bodies should look like on stage in 19th century America. So she kind of was the one who got this last word. Since she was a woman, she was kind of seen as this person who could speak on behalf of women. And women said, burlesque hurts our gender, which of course is not true.
Yes. As we know, if it's not your business, back up.
Of course.
Like if this is not your lived experience, then back up. Or express your opinion and recognize that your opinion should be part of a panoply of democratic understanding. Like your opinion can be contrary to someone else's opinion. To convert someone is like an inherently colonial act.
Yeah.
Grow up. Have your opinion.
Grow up, babe.
Keep it to yourself.
I know. So unfortunately, because of these newspapers calling it immoral and saying that it harmed women and, you know, Olive's successful lecture tour, it actually scared away the women from coming to burlesque shows. So women felt like they were going to be judged too much, or that maybe there was a danger, since all these people were saying it was dangerous and bad. And so the audiences of these shows became almost completely men. And I'm sure there were some gay men in there, but as we know, they weren't really allowed to speak up much back then.
Yeah. You couldn't spot them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was almost, completely men. And what do men want out of comedy?
Violence.
men. They want to listen to men.
More men. Yeah, that's true. That's
men.
true.
Yeah.
Men equals violence in this synonymous
you were
loop
close.
here. Yeah. Yeah.
You were close.
Very close. Sorry, I used a synonym.
So, unfortunately, at this time, burlesque sort of became about male comics and then women who became these scantily clad dancers. So no longer were women playing both roles, like comedian and dancer. There was this gender separation that happened because that was what the audience essentially wanted.
Yes.
And that is the story of what happened to the first burlesque troupe. And it would stay that way for a long time. And, vaudeville would start to kind of break down those barriers. But, this is the sad story and the triumphant story in a lot of ways of the British blondes.
The first, well, I was going to say the first British invasion, but I don't think that's true. Yes. Yeah, this paradigm really does persist. This idea of like the gendered roles being split, even in cool queer burlesque environments in which I am really privileged to work. And in some ways, like it is a radical re-examining of these environments. But then in other ways, like if you don't interrogate it, we really do fall back into these roles. And I think, I've seen a lot of shows and thankfully avoided being in them for the most part. But like this idea that like, I'm a man and I'm wearing a tuxedo and I'm telling the story. And then this dumb biddy over here is going to come out and show you her knockers. Don't you love it? I'm going to stay in this tuxedo because I'm 55 years old and gross. And then you're like, that's the gayest man I've ever seen. And then you like hear about their bad behavior backstage, like being actually straight men in the space who are like being incredibly predatory toward all the lesbians around them. Because again, many of the women in working in burlesque are queer and we love to see it. But yeah, I think that this like really does persist. Again, thankfully it is the minority of experiences. It is like not the norm, but it does persist, right? Because like kind of power dynamics unevaluated will kind of fall back into their like most problematic state, right? Yeah, which is like men behaving badly and women behaving silently, to oversimplify. But, there's a lot of people working against it, but it does happen. Even today, I'm thinking of people specifically that I will not name.
So that's the end of our story.
Incredible.
Now that we've kind of learned about the original form of burlesque, what it looked like in the 1800s and what it looks like now, I think a question that I have, especially obviously in this particular political climate that we're in right now, I want to know what is so threatening about burlesque? Because I think that drag and burlesque are so married at this point that even though the word burlesque isn't coming up necessarily in these moral panic headlines, it is folded into what we're talking about now. So what is it about burlesque that is so threatening? Not the idea that it's immoral, like what's underneath all of that that makes burlesque dangerous to the status quo?
Yes. Great question. And I think exactly like you just said, I think it is in the normie's mind kind of linked to all these other threatening forms like drag, like, good comedy, like vaudeville, like striptease, like all these things are kind of linked in a lot of people's minds and kind of mixed, like there's this idea that like, oh, that drag queen's in a bra and that must be burlesque, which is not how it works. But I think that's the first problem, right? It's just confusion, and confusion makes people scared and fear makes people mean.
Yeah.
So I think that's that first like 1-2 punch. I think one thing, like it feels tangential, but I actually do think it's like really baked into this is kind of what I mentioned before. Like so much of burlesque is like the preamble to sexual activity and then it kind of ends before it's over. I think men are socialized to take that as an invitation to violence. I think we see that a lot of times in men's relationship to sex workers, especially trans sex workers, especially trans sex workers of color. I think that they have this idea that like to be tricked is to be demeaned. And when I am demeaned, I must avenge myself through physical violence. And so I think sometimes burlesque, being a political form, can make people feel tricked, can make people feel demeaned, can make people feel bamboozled. And I think for some of us, especially queer people, I think we love to be bamboozled. I think that's like part of the fun, right? And I think for, straight people, whatever that means, I think that often is like they are socialized to read that as a threat and to kind of like spin us positive. I don't think it has to be. I think that there's enormous joy to be found inside of that. And that actually leads me to like what I think is the biggest threat is like the demonstration of joy and the contagion of joy is inherently fearful to people who are seeking to control. Right.
Yes.
So like a conservative mindset, religiously conservative mindset, as I can speak to, like looping back to us, what I was talking about in my upbringing is like the more kind of joyfully I felt my sexuality expressing inside of myself, the more the kind of like militant control was trying to be exerted on me. Right. And I think that to see largely women, to see queer women, to see gender nonconforming people, to see disabled people and people of color, like joyfully experiencing their bodies is inherently threatening to people who are interested in controlling those bodies, right? Because like joy is actually an incredible motivator to change. And so the more you see marginalized people experiencing joy, the more those marginalized people are interested in finding more joy off stage, right? And this has been true in my personal life, right? Like experiencing burlesque as a performer has made me feel so ecstatic that it's led me to ask questions about like, how do I feel this ecstasy all the time? How do I build this kind of like celebration of the body and the kind of uplift of all kinds of bodies, like something I do a lot for work and for, my life as a person is like work with disabled people and bring accessibility into theater environments. That undoubtedly is a thread from this, right? It's like, as a burlesque performer, I experience joy in my body, and it causes me to ask like, wow, how do I get other people to experience joy in their bodies? How do I make more of that happen? I bring more bodies into the equation, right?
Yes.
And that like, that kind of ball rolling, I think, is what a lot of like thoughtful queer performers and burlesque performers bring to their lives, right? We start to like, wow, I experience solidarity on stage with a bunch of lesbians. I want to have that all the time. What does that look like out in the world? Oh, that leads me into political realities. That leads me into social realities. That leads me into familial realities, right? Like I'm not a dater, but I have deep intimacy with all of these people in my life. And that is inherently threatening to people who are interested in pushing a heteronormative agenda of like, get married, make babies. And, burlesque demonstrates sexuality that is non-reproductive. That's always been that old chestnut. That's always been scary to conservatively minded people, regardless of their religious ideas. It's like, oh my God, sexuality for pleasure, that can't lead anywhere good, is inherently threatening too. So yeah, I think like the biggest threat is joy, because like joy is a motivator to political action, and joy is kind of the point. So like when normie oppressive people see people like enjoying themselves, like that to them, I think subconsciously is a threat, because they're like, oh no, if they keep experiencing joy, then they're going to keep seeking joy. And that's going to mean the end of all the things that we hold dear, like all of these like old ideas and scary ideas.
Ugh.
So, not to be like that guy, like, cause I don't believe that love wins, like, let me just like spill that tea. Like love doesn't win, fear wins, in fact. And I think we're seeing exactly those seeds growing right now, right? Like love is not winning anything, fear is winning. And the only antidote I know to fear is joy. So I think like that's that like existential threat, like not to be like Tolkien about it, but if there were two sides, I think fear and joy like kind of battle each other a little bit.
I love that.
Which is maybe a false binary, but I think
there are no
sums it up.
There are no false binaries, because all binaries are false.
Yay! There we go.
Okay, that's a beautiful, perfect, wonderful place to end. Just like you, beautiful, perfect, wonderful Woody Shticks. Thank you so much for being here and for being the steward of our live shows. And please come, everyone. If we come to your town in the fall and the winter of next year, please come and see us. You're not going to regret it. Come and see Woody's beautiful thonged ass.
It's true.
You're just such a delight. You're such a joyful person, and you bring so much joy to my life. So I just so appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope you'll come back again soon.
The feeling is mutual. Thanks, Chelsey, for representing all the fun nerds and bringing us all the information we need to stay strong. It's hard in these streets.
Oh, it is.
Love isn't winning, turns out, but leaning into our communities and taking care of each other is where it's at. So thank you for facilitating part of that community here on your podcast.
Thanks, Woody. This was American Hysteria. If you'd like to learn more about Woody, get in touch, or try to catch him in a city near you, go to woodyshticks.com. You can find a link in our episode notes. If you want to support our show and make sure that we can continue making it, go to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. You'll get ad-free episodes as well as bonus content like the show that I do with our producer Miranda called Hysteria Home Companion, where we bring you stories related to the topics that we're covering and stories that we just know that you'll love. That's patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. You can follow us on Instagram at American Hysteria Podcast. And if you're feeling generous, leave us a review on whatever app you use. It really helps us out. You can also go to AmericanHysteria.com to get some of our merch and leave us a message on the Urban Legends hotline about a tale that you remember from growing up or even a tale you've heard recently, and we might do an entire investigation about it. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler. Our associate producer is Riley Swedelius-Smith, and I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I hope you have a great week.